Picture the world's biggest dump, and you probably don't picture an ocean.
In an underwater paradise, a plastic nightmare.
Vietnam's Da Loc beach has almost more plastic than sand.
8 million metric tons of plastic trash enters the sea from land every year.
Just one word. Yes, sir. Are you listening? Yes, sir. Plastics.
Chemical makeup of plastic varies quite widely. Sometimes some plastics are actually very simple. Polyethylene, for example, is just simply a chain of carbons saturated with hydrogens. So this is a common, simple hydrocarbon. Other plastics are much more complex. PTFE, for example, which is Teflon, is a very complicated plastic. And then you have polyvinyl chloride, which is an interesting plastic because it's carbon plus it's chlorine, and that creates significant issues. So some plastics are very simple, some are much more complex. So first of all, nobody really knows how long it takes plastic to break down. Plastic was only invented 100 years ago, so the estimates are that it takes thousands of years to break down. That's based on computer modeling and what we know about the chemical bonds that are involved and materials themselves. But you've also got the main thing you have to take into account is what are the circumstances? Where is it breaking down? And if it's in a landfill that's just starved of oxygen, there's not a lot of bacteria, thousands of years may be an underestimate, many thousands of years. Oceans, interestingly, where you have exposure to more weather and more bacteria in other situations, like a lot of weather, may actually make it shorter for less time in the ocean than other places. It's certainly a long time. Why does it take that long? Because there's nothing natural that breaks it down. Plastics are designed to be durable, designed to be tough, and so they weren't designed with the idea of them being broken down. They were designed with the idea of lasting as long as they can. So you want them to be resistant to weathering and things, so that they keep your chips safe or your Tupperware clean and all those kind of things. They're designed specifically to be. I don't know exactly what's most dangerous. The biggest concern is PVC, polyvinyl chloride, because of the chlorine in it. And when you burn PVC, it creates dioxins, which are one of the most potent toxins that we worry about in our environment. And it also creates CFCs. CFCs are chlorofluorocarbons, and they are the things that break down the ozone layer and they create other toxic effects. PVC, one of the problems with it is it's essentially not recyclable because of those kind of reactions. When you have something simple like a hydrocarbon, like polyethylene or polypropylene is another one that's fairly easy to break down. It's just carbon and hydrogen. You can digest it and rebuild with the constituents. When you throw in things like chlorine or fluorine, then you've got a lot more chemical problems to do.
Actually, they have many negative effects, and one of the worst that I can think of is the fact that it just doesn't degrade. They're giving a figure of about 500 years at least, but I don't even think they've measured that. They just know that it's at least 500 years, and even when it degrades, it doesn't actually go away like a piece of paper might rot away into its basic forms, but the plastic turns into little microchips of plastic, and this ends up floating through the ocean, and creatures are eating this at the bottom of the food chain, and it works its way right up to the point they say there are no fish in the ocean anymore that are organic because they're all full of plastic. Plastic's a bad thing also because it attaches to poisons or toxins, so it brings it right in with it into animals who eat it. So it also entangles animals as far as wildlife. They get caught in these soda containers. You see them with their necks stuffed through there. They feed the beautiful. They find it everywhere. They find and they feed it to their chicks. So they'll find albatrosses with their stomachs just bulging with all sorts of junk that they found on the beach. And all the plastics we're dumping into the ocean and all the plastics Asia are dumping in are just circling into this giant garbage patch in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, where it's like gorgeous tropical paradises, and there's I think this garbage patch is the size of part of New England, And that's why all these animals are being exposed to it continuously. It forms because the oceans tend to move in they call it a gyre. It's a big circulating pattern. There's currents that just because of the spinning of the earth and Coriolis effect, but basically it ends up forming almost like a whirlpool in the center. And so plastics coming in from California or Seattle and plastics coming in from Japan and China, they all eventually, over a period of time, work their way to the center of this gyre, the center of this whirlpool, and end up floating ad infinitum in this place referred to as the Pacific Garbage Patch. And that's not the only one. There are like 5 major gyres in the world, and every single one of them are the same. It's just so striking out there to go to this beautiful tropical paradise off Hawaii, thousands and thousands of miles away from anything, and what do you find is fish nets and floating plastic bottles and garbage of all sorts, plastic that just doesn't degrade. Surprisingly, we're actually overfishing the oceans something fierce, and even to the point that there are cultures now that are beginning to, you run out of the big fish, so where you go, you keep going smaller and smaller. There are countries that are starting to harvest krill, which is like just a tiny little shrimp-like little thing at the bottom of the food chain that everybody else eats. Well, those things eat tiny plastic because they eat plankton, and the tiny plastic is, if you're going and just straining plankton out of the water, you're straining plastic beads out of the water also, these microbeads. And so they're just full of plastic, full of toxins that are attached to the plastics, and so anyway, believe it or not, there isn't an ocean creature that isn't affected. When you talk about like turtles eating plastic bags that's floating with water, they look exactly like a jellyfish. The leatherback turtle, birds, continually the seabirds that feed this debris to their chicks, that's horrendous. So actually anything that's living in the ocean now is affected by plastic. And creatures that aren't living in the ocean, because when I have my fish for dinner this Friday, I'm consuming a certain amount of plastic beads. And they even say, like this clothes I'm wearing, terribly enough, they say when this washes through the washing and drying cycle, that it's made out of plastic fleece. And chips of it are actually, these tiny little beads are going into our water system, going into the nearest watershed, down the river, into Long Island, into the ocean. And so every time you wear fleece, as warm as it is, it's definitely, again, contributing to that effect. And starting right from the bottom up, every animal is affected.
I was very disturbed recently to learn that the use of plastics is getting worse. You'd think with all this press that plastics have been getting, one of the solutions would be to use less plastic, and it's not happening. It's going the other way. People are using more and more disposables. People are getting rid of plastic straws, and garbage bags, which are 2 significant concerns. But if you're replacing those with so many water bottles, so many plastic water bottles, right now we're like, in some ways, I think the worst possible case. First of all, I think PVC should be just eliminated. Chemists have got to be able to find a better way of making plastic that's as strong as PVC. It's got some great properties, but it's not worth the environmental cost because it's essentially never going to go away. Polyethylene, on the other hand, is pretty straightforward stuff, and scientists have built some pretty effective, pretty strong, pretty durable versions of that. So that's the first thing, is to just make more responsible plastic. The other thing is burning electric. It's never ideal to burn anything that creates carbon dioxide. However, when you're talking about putting it in a landfill or getting rid of it by burning it, I think combustion is the way to go, especially if, like in Connecticut, you can use it to generate energy. So I'm actually a pretty big fan of combusting plastics. Polyethylene and polypropylene burns so cleanly, it's pretty clear. But when you throw in something like PVC or Teflon, which is PTFE, they have a lot more complexities to them that are going to create more harmful problems. The third thing is additives, plastic additives, BPA. Everybody's concerned with BPA, as they should be, because it's an additive to plastic that leaches out, and really, really high doses in rats cause cancer. Does it cause cancer in people? It could. I think the evidence is still a little bit unclear, more than a little bit, I think it's very unclear. Certainly, if you had huge doses of it, you'd be very concerned. But at the levels of exposure that we're talking about, it's probably not a big concern. But nonetheless, you'd be better off not using additives when you're because the other question is how you get rid of plastics. And the ideal thing would be to have plastics that are biodegradable, right? That they can be broken down by bacteria. And right now, like I said before, we've tried to make plastics that are durable. No bacteria are going to break them down. But you could change the formula, make them more biodegradable, but they're not as high quality plastic. So there's a bit of a trade-off there. But there's got to be a way to create a system that's able to break down the plastics without creating problems. And people are talking about composting systems where they're basically bacteria that are engineered to digest plastic. And that's a really encouraging thing, but I think it's going to be really slow. It's going to be really hard to get that into a mainstream situation. But that's the idea.
I think the worst is certainly single-use plastic bags, only because there's such an easy alternative. I mean, there are bags that you can bring that last. I've got some that are 6 to 8 months old. Eventually, they do break down, but just to walk into Walmart or something, and if I let them, I'd be carrying like 7 plastic bags with 3 items apiece in each one. And what's the first thing I do when I get home is I tend to just throw them away. I save them. They're supposed to be ways that they recycle. I'm not exactly sure what they do when they say they're recycling them, whether they're melting them down and making more, which would be good. I tend to wonder sometimes if they just don't get thrown away, but inevitably they will not degrade, and they just break down into those little microplastic chips I talked about. So, just shop with a plastic bag and take like a reusable plastic bag, single-use stuff, and they're talking about outlawing it, which is an awesome thing in the state of Connecticut, and some of the states that are really on top of things, or the cities, are going that way, and I'm sure in the next 5 years everybody will be that way, which is great.
Multi-billion-dollar question. It's a tremendous question. I think number one is just cleaning it out directly. Number 2 is figuring out how it's getting there and stopping it. And there's one thing I think that people are really overlooking, which is a stupid solution, which is simply to put some kind of grid over storm drains. Right? If you go to a coastal city like New York or LA, the storm drains are going into rivers, which is going to the ocean, and that's a primary source of plastic out there. All you have to do is put a metal grid in there to catch the plastic. You have to empty them and stuff, but that would cut off the main source of ocean plastic at its source. Is there a scientific way? Is there a chemical way? Is there some kind of engineering approach we could use to get all the plastic out of the ocean? And I'd be really nervous about that, just because there's such a massive quantity out there. If you tried to take a digestive approach with bacteria or with a chemical or something like that, I'd be worried that you disrupt the ecology that's already there, and you don't want to take a bad problem and make it worse because we're unaware of some consequences of your solution.
Scary, very scary, because it's like we're so dependent. Believe it or not, in 1950, back, I'm not going to tell you, but back when my parents were young, there was just none of this. There were no plastic bags. Nobody had plastic bags and things like that. And so plastics was just beginning to come on the market in the 40s and 50s after World War II. And so it's a really recent problem. And to see the magnitude of the problem in such a short period of time, and we're so dependent on plastic. It's a great material, but wow, I'm not sure. We better solve that problem really quick, because it's right up there with climate change, right up there with overfishing and totally destroying the diversity of the ocean. Those are like 3 of the top, plastic, overfishing, and climate change. They're going to do us in.
Are you guys aware of just how much the bottom is falling out of plastics recycling work? Because that's a huge issue now. So most of the plastics that was getting recycled by the state recycling programs was actually getting shipped to China, and then the Chinese were actually paying for the recycling. And so it's actually, at one point, it was cost beneficial, and then it became cost neutral. And now China is not taking those products anymore. They're not taking the waste plastic. So that's creating a situation where states have so much plastic they don't know what to do with. Literally don't know what to do with it. A lot of it's getting burned. A lot of it's getting put in landfills. Even though it's collected through a recycling program, it's not cost effective to recycle it. And that's a huge problem. That's got to be fixed. I think there's definitely industrial solutions to that. The other weird thing, possibility, everybody switched to single-stream recycling. We have metal, glass, and plastic all in one. Well, the problem is you have one type of glass, one type of metal, a few types of metal, and then 20 types of plastic. And sorting all those different plastics is the issue. And actually, as labor intensive as it is, I think we need to go back to two-stream recycling, one with metal and glass, which are easy to recycle, easy to separate, and then one with plastics, where we kind of put them aside and say, okay, we don't know how to handle these right now, and we have to find a way. I think that to me is the biggest concern today, is recycling. We all think of recycling as the answer to these problems, but it's just kicking the can down the road.
Well, every chance that I can, I do. I've worked mainly with oceanography and ocean bow up here at the high school level. At the elementary level, surprisingly, I do sometime. I would do it if I see somebody throw something on the ground. It's usually a teaching moment with the kids. I never did a tremendous amount, although I should. But it's always like if I found it like on the beach or something, a situation to discuss. Because you have to always teach people in a way that they have hope that they can do something. And so that's generally the approach that I've taken even with my kids at the high school level, even though sometimes I get super discouraged. But unless I have every one of those students doing just a bit, you'll never get anywhere. And I see a mentality in kids now that's awesome compared to the mentality of people when I was a kid, where nobody really was aware or cared. It just didn't seem like a problem that a 15-year-old should be worrying about, whereas you guys are so much more on top of it. So it's really, that's encouraging to see.